what do you have to say to the people? There are a lot of people out there who I think still, rightfully or wrong, who say AI is a fad.
I think it's here to stay. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point.
We're moving towards a time where people can focus on what they want to focus on.
Totally. And the more, especially we use AI every day to write code and all that, and like some of it, there are moments where it feels like, oh my gosh, like this is, why would I be needed?
Opened up a can of worms that I'm afraid we're going to have to take that lid off, and that is AI taking people's jobs. Obviously, everyone talks about it. It's top of everyone's mind, especially if you work in the creative or development spaces. And I have a take on that and the whole, like, can one person build $1 billion company? I'm going to share it with you. I'm interested to see what your take. Essentially, here's the thing. Think about writing. You know, there was a time when, like, nobody could write. You know, everyone was illiterate, and like one person in the town was able to write anything. That person, picture that like your software developer from 2016. It's like, this guy can write. This guy can communicate to a computer. Nobody else can. You obviously have this status, which is super cool. But then education starts to become more prevalent. People start learning how to write. And we live in a world right now where, you know, at least in most of the developed world, most people can write coherently, perfectly fine. That being said, how many jobs are there in the writing space, in something so many people, if not everyone, could do? I'm a great, fine, okay writer, I guess. I would happily and do pay writers to do things, because here's the thing, and this is where this relates. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if anyone can do anything. They don't. For example, dude, people, now anyone can make a website, anyone can make an app. Anyone's been able to make a website for like 10 plus years, dude. Wix.
Totally. Squarespace, yeah.
But they don't. That's the thing. And at the same time, you have people who, for example, my dad built my mother's company a website. You know, he can make a website. He's not a web designer. He's not a professional web designer. And so the way that I see this going, this is my positive take, but also I think the most likely take is we're moving towards a time where people can focus on what they want to focus on. What interests them. Because at the end of the day, if you don't care about websites, you're not going to be able to look at a website and say, this sucks, or this is better. And you're not going to be able to, whether it's in Webflow, whether it's with Claude Code, whatever it may be, you're not going to be able to improve it. I could build like the worst slop of a like one prompt website ever, show it to my mother, and she's going to be like, oh, this looks great. But if I show it to you, you're going to say, well, this looks like slop, and you're going to know how to improve it. And so I think there's a lot of like fear mongering going around, like AI for jobs. The thing is, there have been numerous giant leaps. For example, accountants and bookkeepers, man. Think about this. 20, 30 years ago, they were like writing in a literally keeping books. That's where the name came from.
Right.
We have computers that can calculate all of this stuff and algorithms and all this stuff. Are bookkeepers obsolete? No, absolutely not. They've adapted to these tools and they're able to do more. That's the future that I see this is going in. So do you think your job anytime?
Yeah. I think, man, I generally align with that take. Like, I think there's so much to be said about, like, we've always, natural evolution of societies have always just increased optionality is, like, I guess a way that it makes sense in my brain of, like, even something silly I often say, even with my team when I was still at Webflow and all that, is the more, especially we use AI every day to write code and all that, and like some of it, there are moments where it feels like, oh my gosh, like this is, why would I be needed? But I think, and then I always joke that like, it's fine, when AI takes my job, I'm going to start a robot lawn care company, because here in the Midwest, we like grass and, fields and things. But here's the reality is, like, as long as people have had lawns and then lawnmowers came around, and even now you can go buy lawnmowers that do it themselves, or, you don't even have, like, they're electric. You just put a battery in and charge it like your phone and it just goes. It's so easy to use. Anybody can do it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have lawn care companies, right? Like, exactly to your point, no one wants to do the effort, or adversely, like, they want to be presented in a certain way, like with a website, professionally or not, and recognize somebody else can do this much better. No matter what tools they use to do it, they don't really care. They just don't want to do it, and they want it to look good. So I think that's forever going to exist. I think in the same realm as like, SaaS in general, I think we'll probably see the same thing. Like, sure, there's going to be people that want to save a buck and they feel very determined to go make their own website or their own bookkeeping accounting tool and just have AI build it and host it, and they can fully control it and do whatever they want. That's awesome. That is so empowering. But that doesn't mean that the vast majority would want to even go to that effort. Even if it's only 1 or 2 prompts, there's still like, I think another layer there of uncertainty, right? Like my own experience with AI, especially in the last, I would say, year, of like maybe 2-3 years ago is when I started, I think a lot of us started using AI to write, like, especially for the Webflow community, like, write me some JavaScript to do something I can't do natively in Webflow, right? And it started early on. I remember so much of like, because it took me, I'm not formally trained in front end or code in general. I've just learned it over the years, right? And JavaScript has always, what I would say, especially like 5, 6, 7 years ago, was the part that was, I just struggled learning the most. And I still would say I'm no, like, full expert today, but I'm very comfortable today reading most, especially vanilla JavaScript, to be clear, not a React Pro or anything. And so a few years ago using AI, it felt like I really had to like handhold it to get it to do the right thing and not write just completely hallucinated syntax and all that. Whereas today it's like, as long as I'm clear on my first prompt on everything that needs to happen and have, like, especially in Webflow, all the attributes or anything set up and structure set up as I know I would probably do it if I wrote the JavaScript myself to do some custom thing, it's usually like one hit. Like, it's just done, everything's working. It's interesting to see how that has evolved, but even though it's easy to do, and the more I do it and the more it is one shot, it still takes me a lot of time to trust that it's right, especially at scale, right? And so what I'm getting at is like, I think it's going to take, even if, 6 months from now, anybody can just one shot a new accounting app on that same general topic, are people going to actually trust that it's legit and that it's not like going to hallucinate their numbers and metrics and things that are like quite vital to get right? I don't know. I would venture that the majority is going to take a lot longer for them to use it consistently enough to know that it's there and works. Like, even to draw another simple analogy, or like you mentioned writing too, man, I've had a goal for years. I updated my portfolio the last time, like actually overhauled it like 3 or 4 years ago. And I just recently unhid and published my first like blog post that I've wanted to do forever. But I just struggle to like sit down and write. But at the same time, I have this like long running list of ideas of things I've always wanted to communicate, and just finally gave in basically to working on having Claude help me write, but then doing it in my voice and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, the first thing I posted was this general analogy of like curiosity that like, will we see a similar transition with AI in the next coming years as we saw 100+ years ago with transportation, mainly cars? Another side fact about me, I mentioned I grew up around boats. I just grew up around stuff with motors. Like if I didn't have to work or anything, I think I would end up spending my time just like tinkering on a car or boat or something. I just find that fascinating. And so especially the car industry in general, when we went from horses and buggies to cars, like, again, had Claude do a bunch of research on this and like, to fact check some of my, I guess, guesses or understandings of it from my limited perspective, was like, that happens so much faster, I think, than we realize. Between like the first cars being available to all of a sudden, millions of them on the road and people using them and not driving or riding horses anymore. I have to imagine those early years, like there was the same resistance to trust. Like, a horse is a living thing. You can give it food and know that it's healthy because it's walking well and all that. There's inherent trust that it'll get you there. But when you have these net new machines like cars, trying to be empathetic for the people living in that time, I would have been like, I don't know, this like bucket of bolts exploding fire in a box in front of me feels like either it's going to explode me or it's not going to get me there because a bolt's going to come undone. Like, I don't think I can trust it. But then it's interesting how we as humans follow this trend of like, what other people are doing. So we can get through trust much quicker when the masses suddenly adopt it, right? Like, a really silly analogy is, I mean, you have a kid, right? If you've seen the movie Zootopia, it's a Disney movie, and even if you haven't, there's this scene in it where like one of the main characters early on is he runs like hustle operations to make money, and so like his main hustle is he buys these massive popsicles for cheap from the elephant part of town, and then goes and melts them down and then freezes them into mini little popsicles and then resells them to all these mice in the mice part of town to make a profit. And it's seen as a hustle or whatever, but I think what's interesting is the part where it shows these like mice coming out of bank, mice, or maybe they're like hamsters, I don't know, doesn't matter. And then all they have to do is get attention of one. And then all of a sudden the full line follows all of them and they all just eat all the popsicles and then boom, it's all done. Like, look, savage take, but we are so that way as humans. Like, we are so like, well, everybody's doing this. Everybody's driving a car. Everybody's using the internet. Everybody's using AI. Like, is that going to be the forcing factor, you know, in some ways? I don't know. In one brain, yes, but I think there's this, for whatever reason, feels bigger. This feels like it has more gravity, more fear, more distrust inherently, especially like, sorry, a whole other tangent, but just like think about media alone or like movies. The amount of AI doom and gloom movies that have been put out in the last 10 years, for good reason. It's entertaining, I guess, but also it does spark emotion, right? All the way back to Terminator. Like, it's, I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think, sorry, to wrap it all up, I think my general take is this, in agreement of like, I think it's going to take time. I don't think it's going to go as fast as we think. I think it's the people that really adopt it the most and then show what's possible is the undetermined factor on like, if that part, if those group of people really share that openly and then start to scale and then many more people follow, then that could be, you know, a catalyst to the greater adoption of people, again, write in their own accounting software. Like, who knows, man? It changes so fast. And like, it's also amidst a world that is, I mean, let's be real, like kind of in turmoil right now, kind of on this like precipice across countries disagreeing and like all these things that it just feels unnerving, the, you know, the economies and world that we're living in. So time will tell.
I mean,
yeah.
We live in, I think a lot of people kind of, including myself, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of people are perhaps overly positive and overly negative about the time that we live in right now.
Totally.
Things are tough. Things are different. Things are more dynamic and changing and hard to navigate than possibly they've ever been. I'm not a historian, but
yeah.
things that we have access to are insane. And so I always look and I think like, if I wasn't born in this time, which is difficult and comes with its own problems, what would I be doing? Like I said, I started, you know, building stuff for Roblox, then became a graphic designer for a prison and all that fun stuff. I'm here today in Italy, thinking and going, with the type of person I am and the way that I learn and all this stuff, like, what would my life have become if born in, you know, an easier time, as some people would think? And so I am super grateful to be around in this time instead of any other point in history. And I have a question for you, very simple one. What do you have to say to the people? There are a lot of people out there who I think still, rightfully or wrong, I'm not going to share my opinion yet, who say AI is a fad.
I empathized maybe a year or two ago. I think, you know, obviously, to be clear, I'm biased. I, you know, work at one of the major labs. I use Claude every single day for more and more things. And like, my personal take is that like, I think it's here to stay. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point, especially maybe even just tying into our more direct industry of like engineering, web development, design, all that is like, even just the last couple months, the amount of pretty prominent engineers, software developers and such that have come out on social media, kind of just like, I think the way I make sense of it is like relinquishing or fully admitting that, like, you know, they felt that way. And especially these people that these are like, when I say famous, I mean like the people that have like created some of the most adopted frameworks and ways of writing code today, right? React, Bun, whatever, have really come out to say that like, I get it. I can't write code better and faster than AI at this point. That doesn't mean that they're like, I don't need to be I don't need to do what I do anymore. No, it's the vast majority of them are like excited once they get through that hole of like fear and see the potential and the power. They're like, oh my goodness, now I can ship a whole new framework in a month instead of 2 years or whatever. Like, even just to point like a very specific example for me that's close, I guess, in some realms of a niche of development is like, in the Webflow community, you know, I build and maintain Mast, which is a framework to help you build websites in Webflow in a consistent way, whatever. And that is not a novel concept to Webflow. Frameworks have existed in all different languages and things for years. And CSS specifically is, you know, I learned on Bootstrap, whatever, and the hotness now is Tailwind. And if you saw some of the drama from a few weeks ago about like Adam, the founder of Tailwind, kind of coming out that, you know, they were way down on revenue, like 80%, they had to let go 3 people, which was like 75% of their team, all this drama, feel for him, stoked that so many in the community came out to support and all that. But then part of the like underbelly of that was some drama around him, like closing a PR to basically make like LMS, you know, markdown accessible content for all their docs so that AI bots can understand it quicker and help people, you know, create projects with Tailwind, which he saw it at the time was like taking away from their revenue potential of selling templates and all that, because people can just use AI to work with Tailwind for free. So I guess the way I understood that was like he was very apprehensive about AI in general. Fast forward to, I think it was this week, if not last, that I saw all of a sudden now he's like teasing some new, you know, AI tools to help you build front ends. And I'm like, see, like, you know, again, profound, I would say famous in the engineering world person went from screw AI, it's taking my business and making me fire people, to all of a sudden, wow, AI is incredible, I can build my own products and all that. And like, look, to be clear, there's probably more to that than I'm able to judge. I think it's just a recent example where I'm like, this is all shifting so fast. And I think it's pretty clear at this point, it's not just a fad. This is becoming so ingrained to our entire industry and is now having real impact. I mean, Julian, your own story of the member stack site migration, and then like even stuff you've been posting with Ship Studios, like so rad, right? And then at the same time, navigating, I know we talked about a little bit when we just chatted personally before, it's just like, how does that then navigate into how we correlate to proper engineers that have been doing this for a long time, and how do we come alongside them and work in a more consistent way if at the end of the day we're all just prompting, you know, some AI or Claude to do it? Like, navigating that is wild. But I don't know, you know, we'll figure it out as it comes, I suppose.